All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going way back in time to 1453 to talk about the fall of Constantinople. You know, it's one of those events that it really captures the imagination.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and you might be thinking, another history lesson. But I promise, this isn't just about dusty old empires and memorizing dates.
Okay.
This is about power. You know, how it's won, how it's lost, and the lessons that echo through time right up to our own world today.
Mm.
And we've got some fascinating sources to help us unravel all of this. We'll be drawing on insights from Machiavelli, from Sun Tzu, even a touch of Ibn Khaldun. And just to add a little extra spice to the mix, we've got a cannon involved. A really, really big cannon.
Ah, yes, the basilica. That cannon was, well, it was more than just a weapon. I think it was a symbol, really, a symbol of Ottoman innovation, their willingness to embrace new technologies.
Mhm.
While the Byzantines, well, they kind of clung to their legendary walls, assuming those would be enough, which, as we know.
Yeah, so it's like the Ottomans, they kind of showed up with the latest smartphone while the Byzantines were still using those old flip phones.
That's actually a pretty good analogy. The Ottomans understood that technology could be a game changer. They
Yeah.
weren't afraid to challenge the established order, to disrupt the status quo, and that willingness to innovate, I think, played a huge role in their victory.
Makes sense. So this basilica cannon, you said it was big, but what exactly made it so different, so effective against anything the Byzantines had seen before?
Well, imagine this. A cannon so massive, it could launch a 1,500-pound stone ball over a mile.
Wow.
Those walls, the ones the Byzantines had relied on for centuries, they just crumbled under its power. It was a psychological blow, I think, as much as a physical one.
Oh, I bet. You're defending a city that's supposed to be impregnable, and suddenly, bam, your walls are
Uh,
being, like, pulverized by this monster weapon.
Exactly. It had to be demoralizing, to say the least. And it wasn't just the technology itself. It was the strategic thinking behind it. Mehmed II, the Ottoman Sultan, he was brilliant, a brilliant military strategist. I mean, he understood that to conquer Constantinople, he had to do something radical, something unexpected.
Is that where the story about him dragging ships overland comes in? I remember reading about that, but it sounded a little too crazy to be true.
Oh, it's absolutely true. The Golden Horn, the waterway that protected Constantinople's harbor, it was blocked by a massive chain. So Mehmed, he did the unthinkable.
What did he do?
He had his engineers build a wooden trackway and literally dragged his warships overland, bypassing the Byzantine defenses completely.
Wow. Okay, that is some serious out-of-the-box thinking.
Right.
You know, Sun Tzu, be proud. It's all about adapting, finding those unconventional solutions.
Precisely. Mehmed, he really embodied that principle. He recognized the limitations of traditional siege warfare and, found a creative workaround. That adaptability, that strategic brilliance, it was a key factor in his success, no doubt.
So we've got innovative weaponry on one side, a brilliant military mind leading the charge. What was happening inside Constantinople while all this was going down? Were they even remotely prepared for this kind of onslaught?
Well, that's where things get interesting. See, the Byzantine Empire, despite its long history, its strategic location, it was a shadow of its former self by this point. Centuries of internal conflicts, religious disputes, economic decline, it had all taken its toll.
So they were kind of like a house divided against itself, cracks in the foundation, you could say.
A very apt metaphor. Remember Ibn Khaldun's concept of asabiyyah? It's that social cohesion, that sense of shared identity and purpose that binds a society together.
Right.
The Byzantines, well, they were sorely lacking that department.
Can you give us an example of what you mean? How did this lack of asabiyyah actually play out?
Well, there were deep divisions within Byzantine society, religious and political divisions, really
Okay.
the East-West schism, that split between the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholic churches. It left a lasting scar.
Yeah. And politically, there were constant power struggles among the elite families, which of course weakened the empire from within.
So while the Ottomans were totally united in their purpose, the Byzantines were fractured, their energy wasted on internal squabbles.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. They were essentially fighting two battles, one against the Ottomans and one against themselves. And that internal conflict, it made them incredibly vulnerable.
It sounds like a recipe for disaster, right? You've got this powerful, united force on the outside and then a divided, weakened empire on the inside.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about military strength or political unity either. The economy plays a crucial role too. By the 15th century, the Byzantine economy was in shambles.
Really?
Oh yeah. They'd lost control of key trade routes, their currency was devalued, they simply didn't have the financial resources to maintain a strong military or even repair their crumbling infrastructure.
So it's like they were trying to fight a modern war with ancient tools and a nearly empty bank account. That's a good way to visualize it. The Ottomans, on the other hand, they had a thriving economy, fueled by trade and conquest. They could afford to invest in new technologies, build a powerful army, and even offer generous terms to those who surrendered peacefully.
It almost sounds like they were playing on different levels, like the Ottomans were operating in a new era while the Byzantines were stuck in the past.
And that, I think, is one of the key takeaways from this story. Adaptation, innovation, recognizing the changing tides, it's essential for survival, not just for empires, but for individuals, organizations, even entire societies.
This is starting to sound less like a history lesson and more like a self-help guide.
Well, history's full of lessons, if we're willing to listen, and the fall of Constantinople is a particularly powerful reminder that clinging to outdated ways of thinking, refusing to adapt to new realities, it can have disastrous consequences.
Okay, so we've got the Ottomans with their innovative weaponry, strategic brilliance, their economic strength. And we've got the Byzantines struggling with internal divisions, economic woes, and, a failure to adapt. But I have a feeling there's more to this story than just military and economic factors, right?
You're right. The fall of Constantinople wasn't just about armies and cannons. It was about ideas, beliefs, and the clash of civilizations. And that's where things get even more interesting.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's dive into those ideas and beliefs in part 2 of our deep dive.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We left off talking about clashing civilizations, and I'm ready to dig into that a bit. We've got the Ottomans on one side, the Byzantines on the other, both, deeply rooted in their beliefs. So what role did religion play in all of this, in the fall of Constantinople, I mean?
Oh, religion was absolutely central. I mean, it's how both sides framed the entire conflict. For the Ottomans, this was a holy war, a jihad sanctioned by their faith. They saw themselves as instruments of divine will, expanding the realm of Islam. So conquering Constantinople, it wasn't just about territory or power for them. It had this, deeper spiritual significance.
Exactly. And this belief, this fervor, it gave them this incredibly powerful unifying force. Their soldiers, they weren't just fighting for an earthly ruler, they were fighting for a divine cause.
Wow, that's a powerful motivator. But what about the Byzantines? They were devoutly Christian, right? How did they view this whole conflict?
Well, the Byzantines saw themselves as defenders of Christendom, the last bastion of the Eastern Orthodox faith against the rising tide of Islam. They actually called for aid from their fellow Christians in the West.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they framed the conflict as this battle for the soul of Europe.
So it was almost like a religious tug of war, each side believing they were fighting for the right faith, the true God.
Yeah, it was a clash of ideologies, each side absolutely convinced of its own righteousness. And this made compromise, nearly impossible.
Yeah.
For both the Ottomans and the Byzantines, surrendering wasn't just a political defeat, it was a spiritual betrayal.
That puts their decision-making into a whole new light. It's not just about pragmatism or strategic advantage anymore. It's about, deeply held beliefs. Matters of eternal salvation, even.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so fascinating from a historical perspective, because it forces us to examine the power of belief, how it can shape events, drive conflicts, even determine the fate of empires.
So we've talked about the Ottomans' innovative technology, Mehmed II's strategic genius. Are you saying that their faith, their religious conviction, was just as important a weapon?
I think it's impossible to separate those factors. I mean, their belief in their cause fueled their determination, strengthened their resolve, and ultimately contributed to their victory,
It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful forces aren't the tangible ones, like armies or weapons, but the intangible ones, like ideas, beliefs, ideologies.
Absolutely. And this brings us to another fascinating aspect of the story, the cultural exchange that happened after the conquest.
Okay, I'm curious. We've talked about this clash of civilizations, but was there any kind of blending, any cultural fusion that emerged from this conflict?
There was, and it's actually one of the more surprising outcomes, I think. Remember those Greek scholars who fled Constantinople after the fall?
Right. The ones who supposedly sparked the Renaissance.
Exactly. They carried with them, not just their personal belongings, they brought a treasure trove of knowledge, ancient texts, philosophical treatises, artistic techniques, and when they arrived in the West, they found a receptive audience.
So it's like the fall of Constantinople, this devastating loss for the Byzantines. it inadvertently led to a cultural rebirth in Europe.
It's a fascinating twist of history, isn't it? These scholars, they were seeking refuge, and they ended up planting the seeds of the Renaissance, this period of incredible artistic, scientific, and intellectual flourishing.
It makes you wonder about those unintended consequences, those ripple effects that you can never fully anticipate. One empire falls, another rises, and in the midst of all that upheaval, something new, something unexpected emerges.
And it's not just about the Renaissance, either. The Ottomans themselves absorbed elements of Byzantine culture, integrated them into their own traditions, architecture, art, even legal systems. There's this blend of influences that, well, you can still see it in Istanbul today.
So it wasn't a complete erasure of Byzantine culture. It was more of a merging, a fusion of different traditions.
Exactly. And this is a really important point to remember when we study history. It's rarely a simple story of winners and losers, of one culture completely replacing another. It's more nuanced than that, more complex.
And in this case, that complexity led to some pretty amazing outcomes, right? From the flowering of the Renaissance to this unique Ottoman culture that blended Byzantine and Islamic influences.
It's a reminder that even in the midst of conflict and upheaval, there's always the potential for cultural exchange,
Yeah.
for creativity, for new ways of seeing the world.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Religious motivations, cultural influences, the ripple effects of these historical events. It's a lot of process. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think the next logical step is to examine the lasting legacy of the fall of Constantinople. What are the echoes of this event that we can still see, still feel today?
That sounds fascinating. Let's do it. We'll explore those echoes and the enduring relevance of this historical turning point in part 3 of the Deep Dive. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've made quite a journey, haven't we? Through the fall of Constantinople, explored the clash of empires, even saw how the Renaissance kind of rose from the ashes.
Yeah, it's been quite a ride.
It has. And now, in this final part, we're going to explore something even bigger. The echoes of this event that we can still see and feel today, all these centuries later.
It really is amazing to consider, this one event, the fall of a city, set off these chain reactions that still shape our world, like throwing a pebble in a pond and watching the ripples spread outward.
Touching those distant shores.
Exactly.
So where do we even begin to trace those ripples? What are some of the most significant echoes of the fall of Constantinople? The ones that we can still see in our world today, I mean.
Well, let's start with geopolitics. The fall of Constantinople, it marked the end of the Byzantine Empire and the rise of the Ottoman Empire. This shifted the balance of power in the region with lasting implications for the Middle East, Eastern Europe, even the Mediterranean world.
Yeah, like a whole new chapter opened up, right? The Ottomans, this vibrant, ambitious empire, they stepped onto the world stage,
Yeah.
and the geopolitical landscape was forever changed.
Exactly. And the Ottoman Empire itself, even though it eventually declined, it left an indelible mark on the world. Its legacy, it's visible in everything, from architecture and cuisine to language and legal systems.
Yeah, that's a powerful reminder that empires, even when they fall, they leave behind traces of themselves, echoes of their culture and their influence that last long after their political power has faded.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the Ottomans either.
Yeah.
The fall of Constantinople had huge consequences for Western Europe, too. Remember those Greek scholars we talked about? The ones who fled westward? They didn't just bring those ancient texts. They brought with them a whole new way of thinking, a renewed interest in classical learning, and this really helped spark the Renaissance.
Right. We talked about that earlier. But it's worth emphasizing, right? This wasn't just about art and literature. It was a complete shift in how people viewed the world.
Right.
This rediscovery of human potential and the power of reason. It's amazing to think that the fall of one city, an event that seems so distant, could have such a massive impact on Western civilization.
It really shows how interconnected history is. How these seemingly isolated events can have ripple effects that, they extend across continents and across centuries.
So we've got geopolitical shifts, the rise of the Ottomans, the spark of the Renaissance. Are there any echoes that are more subtle, more nuanced, the kind of echoes that we might miss if we're not really paying close attention?
There are. Think about the impact on religious beliefs, for example. The fall of Constantinople, it really intensified the rivalry between Christianity and Islam. And that rivalry, unfortunately, it continues to shape global politics and cultural interactions even today.
Yeah, it's a tragic reminder that historical events can cast such long shadows, that those wounds of the past can take centuries to heal, and sometimes They never fully do.
It's true, and yet, even amidst all the tragedy and the conflict, there's a glimmer of hope there, too.
Ah,
The fall of Constantinople also serves as this cautionary tale,
hmm.
a reminder that even the most powerful empires, they aren't immune to decline and
It's
collapse.
like that famous saying, right? Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it.
Exactly. And by studying the fall of Constantinople,
Mhm.
by understanding the factors that led to its demise, the internal divisions, economic instability, the failure to adapt to changing circumstances, well, we can gain some valuable insights into the challenges that our own world is facing today.
So it's not just about looking back, it's about looking forward, too. Using those lessons of the past to help us navigate the present and maybe even shape a better future.
Precisely. And I think that's really the ultimate value of history. The reason why we keep revisiting these stories, these turning points that shape the world we live in. It's not just about remembering, it's about learning, adapting, evolving.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that we're all part of this grand narrative, this ongoing story of human civilization.
Hmm.
And just like the Ottomans and the Byzantines, we have choices to make, decisions that will affect the course of history for generations to come.
And hopefully, by studying the past, by understanding the triumphs and failures of those who came before us, we can make more informed choices, build more resilient societies, and maybe even avoid repeating some of those mistakes that led to the fall of empires.
That's a powerful message to end on. The fall of Constantinople, this epic event that seems so distant, so far removed from our own lives, suddenly feels incredibly relevant. It's full of lessons that we can apply to our own time, to our own challenges, to our own quest to build a better world.
And that, I believe, is the true power of the deep dive. We take these historical events, these stories that might seem like dusty old tales, and we dust them off, examine them, we dissect them, and what we discover is that they're full of life, full of wisdom, full of things that are still relevant to our own lives, even all these centuries later.
Well said. So, to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep connecting those dots between the past, the present, and the future. And who knows, maybe you'll uncover some hidden truths, some unexpected insights that will help you navigate this complex world of ours and make your own mark on history. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.